70 years of searching, and the answer was hiding on a planet most of the galaxy had already forgotten. Ambassador Riellen stood at the observation window of her ship as Earth filled the view below. Blue oceans, green land, white clouds. A beautiful world, if you ignore the fact that its people had only discovered fire a blink ago by galactic standards. Humanity had been contacted 5 years prior, and they were still on probation. No seat on the Concord Council. No voice. Just a species the rest of the galaxy tolerated. Riellen did not care about any of that today. She cared about one signal. Behind her, Dr. Finn Osara was hunched over a console, his 4 arms moving across data screens faster than most beings could follow. Osara was Helosci, a species known for their obsessive pursuit of genetic perfection. He'd spent his entire career studying bloodlines that stretched back millions of years, and right now, his hands were shaking. "Run it again," Riellen said calmly. "I have run it 9 times," Osara replied without looking up. "The result does not change. There's an archive resonance signature on this planet. A strong one." Captain Brannick, who had been leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed, let out a grunt. He was broad, scarred across the jaw, and had the look of someone who had seen too many operations go sideways. Strong compared to what? The last 6 carriers we found across the galaxy were barely functional. Strong compared to everything, Osara said quietly. "This signature is more complete than any I have recorded in 30 years of research." Riellen turned from the window. The weight of those words settled into the room like something physical. The archive bloodline was not just rare. It was the key to survival. Millions of years ago, the founders, a species so ancient that even their name had been lost, had built a network of installations across the galaxy. These machines could stabilize dying stars, redirect gravitational forces, and prevent the kind of cascade collapses that could wipe out entire systems. But the machines only responded to one thing: the archive genetic signature. For centuries, the Concord had maintained a registry of archive carriers. They were treated like royalty, studied, protected, and trained from birth. But the bloodline had been fading. Carrier after carrier failed to activate the old systems. Some triggered partial responses. Most triggered nothing at all. And now 3-star systems in the outer ring were showing early signs of collapse. Billions of lives were counting on a solution. 70 years of searching across 400 worlds, and they had found nothing strong enough until today. "Where exactly is the signal coming from?" Riellen asked. Osara pulled up a map of Earth's surface. The marker landed on the western coast of a continent called North America. A city named Portland. "A research center?" Brannick asked. "A military facility?" Osara shook his head slowly. "The signal originates from an open area near a river. No major structures." Brannick frowned. "That makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense if you remember that Earth was never managed," Riellen said. "The founders seeded the archive bloodline across thousands of worlds. Most of those worlds were later brought into the Concord, and the bloodline was tracked, controlled, and bred for purity. Earth was forgotten. The bloodline here evolved on its own, without interference, without degradation," Osara added, and there was something close to wonder in his voice. "Every managed bloodline in the galaxy has weakened over time. Controlled breeding narrowed the genetic diversity. But here, on this uncontrolled, chaotic, brutal little planet, the bloodline did the opposite. It got stronger." Brannick pushed off the wall. "So we're going down there to find this carrier. What should we expect? A soldier? A scientist? We do not know," Riellen admitted. "The scan only gives us the genetic signature and a location. We will need to identify the individual on the ground." The ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, flanked by 2 escort vessels that the human governments had grudgingly approved. Riellen watched the clouds part and the city appear below. It was modest by galactic standards. Low buildings, green spaces, rivers cutting through the landscape. They landed at a military airfield where human officials were waiting. There were handshakes and formal words. Riellen moved through it all with practiced patience, but her mind was already ahead, already following the signal. ground vehicles took them toward the river district. Osara had a portable scanner running, and the signal was getting stronger with every block. They passed through neighborhoods that grew rougher as they went. Cracked sidewalks, boarded windows, people sitting on corners with nowhere to go. Brannick looked out the window and said nothing, but his expression made his thoughts clear. The vehicle stopped near a highway overpass. Concrete pillars, a muddy slope leading down to the riverbank. Tarps and makeshift shelters lined the area beneath the road. The smell of damp earth and old smoke drifted through the open doors. Osara stepped out, scanner raised. He walked forward slowly, then stopped. "Here," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "The signal is here." Riellen looked at the overpass, at the tarps, at the small, forgotten community living in the shadow of a highway that roared overhead. She had expected many things. A laboratory, a university, a government building. Not this. Brannick stepped up beside her. "You have got to be joking." Riellen did not answer. She straightened her collar, adjusted her diplomatic sash, and walked toward the overpass. Somewhere beneath that concrete, the most important person in the galaxy was waiting. And the galaxy did not even know his name yet. The thermos had a dent on one side, and the lid did not screw on straight anymore. But the coffee inside was still warm, and that was enough. Denny Harlow sat on a folded blanket beneath the overpass, pouring the last bit into a chipped mug. Next to him, a gray cat with one torn ear was curled up on a pile of old newspapers, sleeping like the world owed it nothing. Denny had named the cat Sergeant, mostly because it showed up every day at exactly the same time and expected to be fed without question. It was a Tuesday. Lena would be coming soon. Lena Marsh had been making her rounds through this part of the city for 3 years. She was a social worker, the kind who actually showed up, not just the kind who filed reports from an office. She brought socks in winter, water in summer, and sandwiches all year round. She never talked down to anyone. Denny respected that. He heard her footsteps on the gravel before he saw her. "Morning, Denny." "Morning, Lena." She handed him a brown bag. Turkey sandwich, apple, a small bottle of juice. He thanked her and set it aside for later. He was not hungry yet. "You look tired," she said, sitting on an overturned crate across from him. "Couldn't sleep. Trucks were loud last night." Lena nodded. She had been trying to get him into a shelter program for months, but the wait lists were long, and Denny had a stubborn streak that made it hard. He did not like being inside four walls anymore. Something about it made his chest tight. She did not push. "There's something weird going on downtown," she said. "Military vehicles all over the place. And I saw something that looked like it was not from here. Like not from Earth." Denny raised an eyebrow. The aliens had been around for 5 years now, but they mostly stayed in Geneva. Seeing them in Portland was unusual. "Probably a trade thing," he said. "They're always doing trade things." Lena shrugged and moved on to check on the others. Denny watched her go, then looked down at Sargent, who had not moved. "Just us," he said quietly. 4 years ago, Denny had been a different person. He had worked construction for 11 years. Good at it. Reliable. The kind of guy who showed up early and left late. Then a steel beam came loose on a job site and crushed 3 vertebrae in his lower back. The company denied the workers' comp claim, said he had been standing in a restricted zone, which was a lie, but they had better lawyers. The medical bills ate through his savings in 6 months. His wife left after the second surgery failed and the painkillers started. By the time he was clean again, there was nothing left. No house, no job. No one. He did not blame anyone anymore. Blame took energy he did not have. He was halfway through the sandwich when the black vehicles pulled up along the road above the overpass. Doors opened, boots on pavement, then voices, some human, some not. Denny looked up and saw them coming down the slope. Government agents in suits, walking stiffly, and behind them, 3 figures that were clearly not human. The tallest one had silver skin and moved like water. The second was shorter, wider, with 4 arms and some kind of device held out in front of him. The third was built like a wall, scarred, and looking at the entire camp like it personally offended him. The 4-armed one stopped about 10 feet from Denny. He looked at his device, then at Denny, then back at the device. "This is not possible," he muttered. The silver-skinned one stepped forward. She had calm eyes, the kind that had seen a lot and learned to carry it quietly. She looked at Denny the way nobody had looked at him in years. Like he mattered. "My name is Ambassador Riellen," she said. "I represent the Galactic Concord." Denny blinked. "Okay, we have been searching for someone. For a very long time. Across many worlds. And you think that someone is here? Under a highway? I know it is." The four-armed one, Osara, stepped closer and aimed his device directly at Denny. It hummed softly, then let out a sound Denny had never heard before, a rising tone, like a bell that would not stop ringing. Osara's hand was shaking again. All four of them. The scarred one, Brannick, moved up behind Riellen and spoke low. "This is the carrier? This man?" Riellen did not answer him. She looked at Denny, at the torn blanket, the dented thermos, the sleeping cat, and the small stack of water-damaged paperback books held together with a rubber band. Then she did something that made every government agent freeze. She knelt down. "Right there on the gravel. I level with Denny. The galaxy has been looking for someone like you for a very long time," she said. "And I understand that this must seem impossible. But I need you to know that what I am about to tell you is the truth." Denny looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the thermos. "You want some coffee?" he asked. "It's not great, but it's warm." Riellen smiled. It was small and tired and real. Behind her, Brannick closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose like a man who had just been told the fate of the galaxy rested on a man who offered coffee to strangers from beneath a highway. Sargent opened one eye, decided none of this was interesting, and went back to sleep. The bed was too soft. That was the first thing Denny noticed when he woke up. For 4 years, he had slept on concrete, dirt, cardboard, and once on a park bench during a rainstorm because the shelters were full. His body had learned to rest on hard surfaces. This bed felt like falling, and his brain did not trust it. He sat up fast, heart pounding, and for 3 full seconds he did not know where he was. The room was white, clean, quiet. There were no trucks overhead, no wind pulling at a tarp, no sirens in the distance. Just a low hum, like the building itself was breathing. Then he remembered the aliens. The silver-skinned woman who knelt in the gravel. The four-armed scientist whose hands would not stop shaking. The ship that had lifted off the ground so smoothly that Denny barely felt it move, that he was in space, orbiting Earth. On a vessel the size of a small town, he pressed his hands against his face and breathed. A soft chime sounded, and a door slid open. Riellen stepped in, dressed in the same formal attire, though she looked like she had not slept either. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Confused, Denny said honestly. She sat in a chair across from him. "That is reasonable." They had explained some of it on the way up. The founders, the ancient bloodline, the machines that could save dying stars. Denny had listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, like a man being told he had a terminal illness and was still processing the first sentence. Now, 12 hours later, it still had not sunk in. "Dr. Osara would like to run more detailed scans today," Riellen said. "With your permission." "He's the one with 4 arms." "Yes." "He looked at me yesterday, like I was a math problem that got the wrong answer." Riellen's mouth twitched. "He is adjusting. We all are." Denny agreed to the scans. He did not have much else to do. Osara's medical bay was enormous and filled with equipment that Denny could not begin to name. He sat on a platform while devices circled his body, projecting light patterns that mapped his cells down to the molecular level. Osara moved between screens with the focus of a man who had forgotten the rest of the universe existed. After 2 hours, Osara stopped. He placed all 4 hands flat on the console and stared at the data. "Well," Brannick asked from the doorway. He had been watching the whole time with the patience of someone guarding a waste of resources. "He does not just carry the archived bloodline," Osara said slowly. "He carries a variant I have never seen. More complete, more integrated. The genetic markers are not isolated fragments like we find in other carriers. They are woven into his entire genome, reinforced across generations." "What does that mean in simple words?" Denny asked. Osara turned to look at him. "It means your bloodline was never controlled. On every other world, we manage the archive carriers. We selected breeding pairs, monitored genetic drift, kept the line pure. And on every other world, the bloodline weakened. It became fragile. He paused. On Earth, nobody managed anything. Your ancestors survived ice ages, famines, plagues, and wars. The bloodline was not preserved. It was forged. Denny sat with that for a moment. So being forgotten was actually a good thing. It was the best thing that could have happened to you, Osara said, and for the first time, there was no condescension in his voice. Only a kind of stunned respect. Riellen stepped forward. Denny, I need to be honest with you about what we are asking. Three-star systems in the outer ring of the galaxy are collapsing. The gravitational forces are cascading. If they fail, billions of beings will die. The only way to stop it is to activate the founder installations, and the installations only respond to our Kai carriers. And every other carrier has failed, Denny said. Yes. And you think I won't? I think you're the strongest candidate we have ever found. But I will not lie to you. We do not know for certain. Denny looked at his hands. They were rough, calloused, scarred from years of construction work and years of surviving after that. They were not the hands of a hero. They were the hands of a man who had learned to get through one day at a time. What happens if I say no? Riellen held his gaze. Then we keep searching, and we probably run out of time. The room was quiet. Brannick shifted in the doorway. He spoke without looking at Denny. He will fold. Look at him. He cannot even handle a bed. Denny did not flinch. He had heard worse. From landlords, from doctors, from the voice in his own head at 3 in the morning when the cold was bad enough to make him wonder if this was the night he did not wake up. He looked at Riellen. I'll do it, he said. But I have one condition. Name it. My cat comes with me. Brannick turned and walked out of the room without a word. Riellen, for the second time since Denny had met her, smiled. The dead moon had no name. It had been stripped from every star chart 10,000 years ago when the last founder installation went dark. Now it hung in the Selvari system like a forgotten tooth, gray and cracked, orbiting a dying star that pulsed with weak orange light. Denny stared at it through the viewport and felt nothing except cold. The journey had taken 11 days. 11 days of faster-than-light travel through corridors of bent space that made his stomach turn and his eyes water. 11 days of Osara running more tests, Brannick avoiding him, and Riellen quietly preparing him for what was coming. He had learned a lot in those 11 days. The founder installations were scattered across the galaxy, built into moons, asteroids, and dead planets. Each one was a machine of impossible scale, designed to manipulate gravitational fields and stabilize star systems. Together, they formed a network. Apart, they were useless. And right now, the network was dead. Previous carriers had tried to activate this particular installation 4 times in the last century. 2 had triggered partial responses, brief flickers of power that faded within minutes. 1 had been rejected outright. The 4th had suffered a seizure and nearly died. Nobody told Denny about the seizure until the morning of the attempt. Brannick mentioned it casually over breakfast, like he was commenting on the weather. Thought you should know, he said. Denny looked at him. Thanks. The shuttle dropped through the thin remnants of atmosphere and landed on a flat plain of gray dust. The installation entrance was 100 meters ahead, a doorway carved into the side of a mountain that should not have existed on a moon this small. It was perfectly rectangular, 30 meters tall, and darker than anything Denny had ever seen. Not shadow, Epshins. They walked in. The interior was vast. Corridors stretched in every direction, walls covered in patterns that might have been writing, or might have been circuits, or might have been something no living species had a word for. Everything was dead. No light, no sound, no warmth. Osara led them to the central chamber. It was a dome, easily 200 meters across, with a platform in the center that rose from the floor like an altar. Above it, a structure hung from the ceiling, a dense cluster of crystalline shapes connected by threads so thin they were almost invisible. That is the activation interface, Riellen said. You will stand on the platform. The system will scan you. If it accepts your bloodline, it will begin the bonding process. And if it doesn't, then we leave. Denny nodded. He walked to the platform alone. His footsteps echoed in the dead chamber. Sargent was back on the ship, asleep in a supply crate, which was probably for the best that he stepped onto the platform. Nothing happened. Then everything happened. Light poured down from the crystalline structure. Not warm light, not cold light, but something that felt like being seen. It moved across his skin, through his skin, into places deeper than muscle and bone. He felt it reading him layer by layer, the way Osara scanners had, but infinitely more thorough. And then it stopped. The light pulled back. The chamber went dark again. Osara checked his device. His face fell. Rejection pattern. The same as the others. Brannick turned to Riellen. I told you. Riellen said nothing. She was watching Denny. Denny stood on the platform in the dark. He could feel something. Not the machine, not the scan. Something older. Like a question hanging in the air, waiting for an answer he did not know how to give. He thought about the previous carriers. Trained from birth. Royalty. The best their species had to offer. They had walked onto this platform with purpose, with ambition, with the weight of expectation and the certainty that they were meant for this. Denny had none of that. He sat down. Right there on the platform. Cross-legged, hands on his knees, the way he used to sit on the concrete under the overpass when the nights were long and the world was too loud, that he closed his eyes. He did not try to be strong. He did not try to be worthy. He just went quiet, the way he had learned to go quiet when there was nothing left to do but breathe. That he thought about the kid he pulled from the river 2 years ago. 16 years old, caught in a flash current, screaming. Denny had jumped in without thinking. The water was freezing. He could barely swim. But the kid was drowning and nobody else was moving. He grabbed the boy's jacket and hauled him to the bank and sat there shivering until the paramedics came. Nobody asked his name. He walked back to his spot and dried off. That he thought about Lena bringing him socks in December. About Sargent showing up every afternoon at the same time, trusting him. That he thought about the cold nights when he was not sure he would wake up and the mornings when he did, and how he kept going anyway. Not because he was brave, but because giving up felt like letting someone down, even if he could not say who. The light came back. Not slowly. Not carefully. It came like a flood. The entire chamber ignited, every surface blazing with patterns that had not been seen in 10,000 years. The crystalline structure above him sang, a sound that traveled through the floor, through his bones, through the walls of the installation, and out into the dead moon's surface. Osara dropped his device. Brannick took a step back. Riellen stood perfectly still, tears forming in eyes that had not cried in decades. The system did not just accept Denny. It wrapped around him. It bonded to him the way a river bonds to its banks, completely and without hesitation. And then, from somewhere deep inside the machine, a voice spoke. It was not loud. It did not echo. It simply existed in every language, in every mind at the same moment. Finally, Denny opened his eyes. The chamber was alive. He was still sitting cross-legged on the platform, a homeless man from Portland, with rough hands and a bad back and nothing to his name. And the oldest machine in the galaxy was listening to him. The news broke across 400 worlds in less than a day that a human had done what champions of the greatest species in the galaxy could not. A human from a probationary planet, a species that still fought wars over imaginary lines on a map, had activated a founder installation that had been silent for 10,000 years. And not just activated it, bonded with it. The first reaction was disbelief. The second was outrage that on the Concord Council floor, delegates from species that had spent centuries maintaining their archive, carriers, demanded an investigation. The Red Honey delegate called it a hoax. The Fenori representative questioned whether humans had somehow stolen the technology. 3 separate motions were filed to seize the installation and remove the human from the equation entirely. Riellen ignored all of it. She had bigger problems. The first collapsing star system, Selvari 3, was accelerating. Models showed full cascade failure within 90 days. If it went, the gravitational shockwave would destabilize 2 neighboring systems. The clock was running. Denny stood in the central chamber of the installation, now fully lit and humming with a sound that felt less like machinery and more like breathing. He had not slept much since the activation. Not because he was tired, but because every time he closed his eyes, he could feel the system reaching out to him, showing him things he did not have words for. Star maps drawn in light. Energy flows that moved like rivers through the dark between worlds. The slow, terrible pull of gravity tearing a star apart from the inside. How does it work? Brannick asked from across the chamber. He had stopped avoiding Denny after the activation, though he had not quite reached the point of being friendly. I don't really know, Denny admitted. It's not like pushing buttons. It's more like talking, except not with words. Osara, who had barely stopped recording data since the activation, looked up from his console. The founder systems are empathically driven. They respond to intention, emotional state, and willpower. Previous carriers attempted to command the system. It rejected every one of them. And he didn't command it, Rielen said from the doorway. No, Osara confirmed. He asked. Denny did not fully understand that either, but he knew what he had felt on the platform. He had not tried to be anything. He had not demanded anything. He had just been still, and the machine had reached back like something that had been waiting a very long time to be treated gently. They brought him to the stabilization interface the next day. It was a secondary chamber, smaller, with a single column of light that connected the floor to the ceiling. Osara explained that this column was the control point for the gravitational output. Through it, Denny could direct the installation's energy toward the collapsing star and counteract the cascade. Billions of lives depend on this. Osara reminded him unnecessarily. Denny stepped into the light. The star appeared in his mind, not as data or numbers, but as a feeling, something enormous and old, burning unevenly, its core wobbling like a top about to fall. He could feel the pull of it, the way it was dragging nearby planets off their orbits, the slow-motion disaster that would end everything in its path, that he did not try to stop it. He steadied it, the way you would steady a shelf that was tipping over, not with force, with patience. He found the weak points in the gravitational field and leaned into them, redirecting energy the way a river is redirected with stones, one small adjustment at a time. That IT took 6 hours. He did not move. He did not speak. Brannick stood guard the entire time, watching Denny's face, which showed nothing but quiet concentration. When it was done, Osara confirmed the readings. Selvari, 3 had stabilized. The cascade had stopped. Billions of lives, saved by a man standing in a column of light with his eyes closed. The reaction across the galaxy shifted. Disbelief became curiosity. Outrage became something harder to define. The Concord Council demanded that Denny appear before them. Rielen prepared him as best she could. She told him about the species he would face, their politics, their pride. She warned him that some would challenge him directly. What do I say? Denny asked. Whatever is true, Rielen said. The council chamber was a vast ring of seats, hundreds of delegates from hundreds of worlds, arranged in tiers that rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Denny stood in the center, under a light that made him feel very small. The Red Hani delegate spoke first. You are an unregistered carrier from an unmanaged world. You have no training, no standing, and no right to hold the most powerful technology in the galaxy. Denny looked at him. You're right. I don't have any of that. Another delegate stood. Our carriers trained for decades. They were bred for this purpose. How can a man who lived beneath a road succeed where they could not? Denny was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. I don't know why the system chose me. I'm not smart enough to explain it, and I'm not proud enough to pretend I deserve it. But I know what it felt like when I sat on that platform. It felt like being asked a question, not about blood or training or who I was supposed to be. It just wanted to know if I would still try, even when everything was gone. He paused. I've been cold and hungry and invisible. I've slept in the rain and been told I'm nothing by people who didn't know my name. And I kept going, not because I'm special, because I didn't know how to quit. The chamber was silent. Then the oldest delegate in the room, a being called Tel Len, who had lived for over 3,000 years, rose slowly from his seat. He looked at Denny for a long time, and he bowed point one by one. Across the chamber, others followed. Denny stood in the light, hands at his sides, and did not know what to do with any of it. So he just nodded and said, "Thank you." It was the most human thing anyone in that chamber had ever seen. 6 months changed everything and nothing. Denny stabilized the remaining 2 star systems within weeks of the first. Each time, the process was the same. He stood in the light, reached out with something that was not quite thought and not quite feeling, and the ancient machines listened. Not because he commanded them, but because he showed up and did the work without asking for anything in return. The Founder Network was waking up. Across the galaxy, installations that had been dark for millennia were flickering back to life, responding to the bond Denny had formed with the central system. Osara called it a cascade activation. Rielen called it a miracle. Brannick did not call it anything, but he stopped leaving the room whenever Denny walked in, which was progress. The Concord offered Denny everything but a permanent seat on the council, a residence on any world of his choosing, a personal fleet, a title that translated roughly to Guardian of the Stellar Lattice, which sounded impressive until Denny asked Rielen to say it again slowly and then laughed for the first time in months. He turned all of it down. "What do you want?" Rielen asked him. They were sitting in the observation deck of the Concord flagship, Earth visible through the window, blue and green and impossibly small. "Three things," Denny said. Rielen waited. "First, full membership for Earth. Not probationary. Full. Seat on the council, trade rights, protection, all of it." Rielen nodded slowly. "That will face resistance, but given what you have done, I believe it can be arranged. Second, I want a fund. A real one. Enough to build housing for every homeless person on my planet. Not shelters. Homes. With doors that lock and kitchens that work and heat that comes on when you turn the dial." Rielen's expression softened. "Done. Third," Denny paused. "I want Sergeant to be given official diplomatic status." Rielen blinked. "Your cat." "My cat." There was a long silence. Then Rielen pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose and sighed the way only someone who had spent decades in galactic diplomacy could sigh. "I will make it happen," she said. Sergeant became the first non-sentient being in galactic history to hold a diplomatic title. The story spread across every network on every world, and within a week, Sergeant the Cat was more famous than most planetary leaders. Merchandise appeared. Songs were written. The Fenori ambassador, who had 6 legs and no concept of pets, requested a personal audience with Sergeant and sat quietly in a room while the cat ignored him completely. That IT was the most discussed event in Concord history that did not involve a war. But beneath the noise, real things were changing. Brannick requested reassignment to Denny's permanent security detail. When Denny asked him why, Brannick was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I have guarded generals and kings. None of them made me want to be better. You do. I was wrong about you." Denny looked at him. "Most people are wrong about most things. That's not a crime." Osara published a paper that rewrote the foundation of galactic genetics. The central argument was simple. Every managed archive bloodline in the galaxy had weakened because control was the enemy of resilience. Purity was fragile. Diversity was strong. Earth, the forgotten world, the unmanaged experiment, had produced the most powerful carrier in recorded history because its people were never protected from hardship. They adapted. They endured. And the bloodline adapted and endured with them. The paper caused an uproar in academic circles, but the data was undeniable. Rielen delivered the final piece of news on a quiet evening, just the two of them in the observation deck again. "The system unlocked a message," she said, "embedded deep in the core programming. It was sealed behind the full activation protocol. No one has read it in over 10,000 years." She handed Denny a translation that he read it slowly. The words were simple, which he appreciated. "We did not build this for gods. We built it for those who endure." He read it again. Then he folded the paper and put it in his pocket and did not say anything for a long time. 2 days later, Denny went home. Not to a palace or a government building or a diplomatic residence. He went back to Portland, back to the River District, back to the overpass. Lena was there, same as always, handing out sandwiches from a brown bag. She saw him coming down the slope and stopped. "You're back," she said. "I'm back. You saved the galaxy. That's what they tell me." She handed him a sandwich. Turkey, apple, small bottle of juice. He took it and fell into step beside her, helping her make the rounds the way he used to before any of this started. They walked together through the camp, talking to people, handing out food, checking in on the ones who had been there the longest. Denny did not mention the council, or the founders, or the three-star systems he had pulled back from the edge. He asked a man named Jerry how his knee was doing. He gave his apple to a woman named Rose who liked them more than he did. By evening, the construction crews would arrive to begin building the first permanent housing complex on this site. Denny had made sure of it. But that was tomorrow. Today, he sat on a bench near the river with Sargent on his lap, watching the sun go down behind the city. The sky turned orange and pink, and the water caught the light and held it like something precious. The little girl walking with her mother stopped and stared at him. "Are you the man who saved the galaxy?" she asked. Denny smiled. "I just showed up." The girl thought about that for a second, then nodded like it was the most reasonable thing she had ever heard, and walked on. Above Portland, invisible to everyone, a Concorde monitoring satellite adjusted its orbit. Across the galaxy, the Founder Network hummed quietly, steady and strong, connected to a man sitting on a bench with a cat, watching the river. The machines that could reshape stars and bend gravity and hold back the death of entire worlds ran on ancient power and impossible technology. But at their heart, deeper than any circuit or code, they ran on something simpler, the stubborn, unbreakable will of a man the world forgot, who never forgot the world.